Hello, and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Unfounded Podcast. Thanks for being here. I'm glad to get another episode out to you quicker than I have been up until this point, but as I've done over the last couple episodes, kind of explained what's been going on in my life, a lot of chaos, setting up a lot of different things. As many of you may have seen, I've been doing a lot of work over the last week and a half, 2 weeks on getting some of the social media platforms connected, set up properly so that you can access them. Over the last 3 years or so, dating back all the way to my last relationship that ended very badly, I had a lot of the work that I had done up until that point that got mixed up and almost destroyed in that process, to where I didn't have access to most of the social media platforms I had set up, and a whole nightmare of things trying to salvage the work that I had started. And it was a process of appreciating the work that I had done up until that point, and recognizing that it had value, regardless of whether other people saw it as valuable in that moment. And so that's why the social media has been kind of low key for the last couple of years. It hasn't been connected properly. It's because I've been healing through that whole time, and trying to focus primarily on that first, on self-love, and then taking little bits and pieces as I feel like I can handle it, to kind of start constructing the world that I want to see and the world I want to be a part of. And so I'm at that point now where just a lot of the legwork of getting everything solidified from an idea form into reality. And so I'm trying to create a community here. Creating a community is something that's very difficult to do, obviously. It takes a long time, and you have to have people that are kind of on the same wavelength, I believe, that can see the world at least and agree about certain aspects of what it looks like, so that we can share in kind of the beauty that is the world, especially in a society that's so kind of lost, right? So that's one of the ideas I'm moving forward with, and trying to create a community through TikTok and through Facebook and Instagram, eventually Rumble, and Locals, things like this, right? Setting up these different communities, so regardless of where you are, what platform you like to engage with, YouTube, right, you'll be able to access this content on any platform, right? And then also be able to interact with me more readily. So that's a big part of the value that I've gotten from adding TikTok over the last 3 or 4 months, is recognizing how beautiful it is to connect with people, and how much more diverse the content that I create is when I'm engaging with other people, their life story, and what they're experiencing. It informs many of the ideas that I talk about here. And so that's another big focus moving forward is engaging in the community more so moving forward, and the conversations that are going on in the zeitgeist and the psyche of the human being. And so in order to do that, like I said, I am working on a couple different things. Some of them are still in the works. Like I said, I have a Locals community that I'm setting up right now. I'm going to hold off on kind of sharing all that right now with you, because it's still not completely set up, but it's founded on that idea, actually specifically founded on kind of the idea that was brought forward with the Sons of Liberty at the founding of the nation. If anybody is familiar with the Sons of Liberty, I'll actually kind of read off a little bit of who they were, what the group was, and how they are significant. I'll go to Wikipedia here really quick, and I'll include everything that I look up in the show notes for you guys if you want to look at the sources or anything like that. Let's see here. All right, the Sons of Liberty was a loosely organized, clandestine, sometimes violent political organization active in the 13 American colonies, founded to advance the rights of the colonists and to fight taxation by the British government. It played a major role in most colonies in battling the Stamp Act in 1765, which I believe is when it was kind of initially created, and throughout the entire period of the American Revolution. In popular thought, the Sons of Liberty was a formal underground organization with recognized members and leaders. More likely, the name was an underground term for any men resisting new crown taxes and laws. The well-known label allowed organizers to make or create anonymous summons to a Liberty Tree, Liberty Pole, or other public meeting place. Furthermore, a unifying name helped to promote inter-colonial efforts against Parliament and Crown's actions. Their motto became "No taxation without representation." So obviously, without the the violent tint. That's not something that I would ever condone. The Sons of Liberty fundamentally were an organization that kind of, at least the way I conceptualize it, was formed in a time frame when there was a lot of untruth and a lot of tyranny. In the colonial period, you had a massive group of people that had a growing disconnect from the mainland, motherland, England, right? Didn't have the same kind of experiences, the same problems, and thus didn't have the same perspective. And because of that, this idea of being taxed without representation was something that was akin to a certain type of slavery, and the ability to speak those ideas out loud is what is, in the time frame was considered radical and dangerous, and was also something that could get you imprisoned or killed or, defamed at the worst level. And so the Sons of Liberty, the organization, was necessary so that people could actually stand up against that. And I believe that that's something that there's a growing need for in not only this country, but around the world. Because of the way that power, the people who are currently in positions of power have wielded their position as if it is something that is only made up of power, as if the human race deserves to be treated like slaves or like NPCs, the cattle that can be consumed and thrown away. This idea is something that I believe deserves to be challenged and at the very least enunciated as a real thing, and groups like this, the Sons of Liberty, were groups that did that. So this is the idea that I want to take forward and kind of establish a community like that, a place, a certain type of safe place, but not the kind of safe place we've heard talked about in political discourse over the last decade. The type of safe place where truth is propagated, where you're not defamed for saying what you actually believe, regardless of what you believe, because that is the point and that is important so that we can actually see what's going on in the world. If you agree with these ideas, if this is something that you feel like you want to be a part of, I encourage you to follow the podcast, to follow my other social media platforms, to keep up to date as I continue the process of establishing this kind of group. So I'll keep you updated on that. It's very exciting, right? And something that I think is deeply needed in the world, right? And so, in addition to that, you may have noticed that I've added a link tree. If you're not familiar with what Linktree is a very handy website that you can sign up for yourself if you are, a private business or something like that. 1111 might be somebody that's listening might be helpful to you. But it's a free website that you can go onto, and if you have all these different social media platforms and you found it very hard to keep them kind of organized or to intermingle them amongst different communities in those platforms, Linktree is really helpful because it brings all of those different links into one place, to where you just share that one single link, and anybody can go see all of the things you're working on in one place. So I set that up as well. I now have a link tree. If you're interested in that, I'll post it in the show notes, so you can just copy and paste it there. It won't let me do hyperlinks, unfortunately, I don't think, in the show notes. I'll give it a shot, but check it out. I have if you do want to support me in any way, you can do that through there. There's a tip jar on there. I appreciate any support you can give me, but I understand fully that this is a hard time monetarily for basically everyone, so that if that is not something that you're able to do right now, the other way you could help support the work that I'm doing right now is by going and following or sharing this podcast with whoever you think it would resonate with, or whoever you think needs the message, right? Specifically, Spotify right now is a platform I'm really trying to grow on, because it's the platform that hosts my podcasts. It's like the home platform, right? I am able to generate revenue by advertising through Spotify when I have the required amount of followers. And so if I can grow the podcast size on Spotify specifically, if you guys go follow the podcast and rate it on Spotify, that'll help support the podcast as well. You can help bring revenue towards what I'm doing that way as well, and I'd be deeply appreciated. Above and beyond, if you do enjoy the podcast, these are things I don't usually say, but it's stuff that I've been needing to kind of relay to the audience, that if you do want to support what I'm doing, the other way you can help is by leaving a review. Podcasting and anything on the internet it's very what's the right word? sensitive to user, the community input. So if you rate the podcast highly, if you really enjoy it, that'll help rank it higher in search results. That'll help place it higher in kind of, discover playlists and things like that, where people are finding new podcasts. So it's a really good way to help grow the show. So if you have just a couple minutes extra in your day, going on whatever platform you mainly use, it doesn't have to be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you get the podcast, and leaving a short review, an honest review, whatever you think about the podcast. Don't hold anything back. This is about truth, right? But I want to hear your feedback, right? And I want to get that feedback so that we can continue to grow this community together. So that being said, that's a lot of talking at the beginning of the podcast to start out. Apologies for that, but I'm going to kind of slowly, as we move forward, whittle that down into a really nice little couple sentence long, hey, if you'd like to support the podcast, do it this way, so that I can just remind the audience and any new listeners that come onto the show without taking too much time. Anyway, that brings me to today's show, right? And what a show it will be. Last episode, many of you may have listened to, was a very interesting one. It was a live episode. This is obviously not live. I'm doing this OG style, right? Just me and a camera and a mic, which is honestly very refreshing. But the last couple episodes of the podcast, I've actually been doing streaming live on TikTok. And as you probably listened to, the last one I did that with got cut off, got censored for community guidelines violations. And it's been an interesting week, because when you have a guideline strike like that, at least on TikTok, you're not allowed to go live again for a certain period of time. It was like 7 or 9 days for me. So I've been locked out of that part of broadcasting, and it's had me contemplating a lot of different things. Censorship specifically, the way it makes you feel, the way it will make you habitually act moving forward. There's some subtleties, some almost subconscious ways that censorship affects you and causes you to start self-censoring yourself if you're not conscious of that process, if you don't intentionally direct your mind back towards the unadulterated truth. Because even a slightly tamed down version of it can lead to a lie eventually, which is what's so crazy, right? Anyway, so I've been contemplating that quite a bit. And then I've also been contemplating the idea of spiritual warfare specifically. And this is going to be the main topic today of the podcast, spiritual warfare. Because it's something that I haven't covered up until this point, because it's something I've honestly been learning and applying lessons towards, trying to understand and conceptualize and integrate fully into my understanding of the universe. And so before I speak about something like that and broadcast it to the world and suggest things to try for people, I want to make sure that I test it. I want to make sure it's actually something that is going to be valuable. Let me get a drink real quick. Hold on one second. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 months, specifically 3 months more so. Because as I started to venture out onto more popular platforms like TikTok and started to do lives and things and grow that audience, what I immediately noticed, and it becomes more obvious when you are isolated often, because when you're isolated for a month or two at a time, you'll get to really intimate with what you feel like without other people around. And all of a sudden, when you start to introduce other people, even if it's not physically, if it's like that, if you're starting to build a community or something, you'll start to feel different. And if you're not careful, you won't recognize it. You'll just tell yourself it's you. But if you're careful, you'll recognize the shifts, the subtleties. And these are energies you're picking up that are now entering around you because you're allowing that door open, right? You're extending that hand out. Hey, let's engage, let's talk, let's share ideas. And because we're doing that in kind of a general open setting with a social media platform like TikTok, anybody can kind of see that message and respond to it, latch onto it, and do basically whatever they want with it, right? And so that's why it's kind of dangerous, especially when you're trying to enunciate fundamental truths. And the reason I say that is because they are fundamentally true, but the fundamental truths are some of the hardest things in the world to recognize as such. Unfortunately, it's kind of counterintuitive, but they're the kind of truths that the only way you recognize that they are fundamentally true is by testing them and by testing them, you question them, right? So innately, when you say a truth that you know is true, that you've tested like that, more often than not, what you get back in the world is questioning, right? And if you're not prepared for it, it'll set you back, and it'll actually make you feel like you're doing something wrong, or maybe you're saying something wrong, but that's not why you're getting the questioning back. You're actually getting questioned back because the truth you're enunciating is something like it's rattling the world conception, the worldview that whoever is responding has, right? And that's a very uncomfortable feeling. It's a tower moment of sorts, if you're familiar with the tarot, right? And we avoid these kind of moments, these times when everything's burning around us, and the only way we get out is to leave it all behind and jump out, right? If someone starts experiencing that after they hear one of these truths enunciated from you or a group of people, it's very easy, and I've done this myself, very easy to identify that person as the person that caused it, right? You almost automatically will if you've never experienced it before. And then if you're not, if you don't recognize that, you'll fall even deeper into a kind of nihilism and hatred of the person, where not only do you want to kind of take them down or try to deconstruct their worldview because that's what they did to you, but you'll also try to find that worldview in the world and do that too. You'll turn into a certain type of joker if you don't respond properly, because you'll actually start to fight against the truth because of the way it made you feel fundamentally. We have this very, very childlike conception of good things being good feelings being good, bad feelings being bad, but this isn't fundamentally true. That when we're disconnected from truth, oftentimes the enunciation of it feels bad, right? When you haven't heard it for a long time, you haven't seen it for a long time, what truth does is shines a light on everything that you are that isn't that. And so then it automatically demands that you become the truth again, which is a lot of work and a lot of recognition and a lot of sadness and depression and things that you have to get through based on the fact that you caused this, right? That you created something that wasn't true over a long period of time, and the hubris that entails as well. And so it's a humbling process, and nobody likes to be sat down like that, right? And so as I kind of get onto a little tangent to begin with, that's partially why spiritual warfare is so prevalent, and also why as you start to wake up, you will notice it more, right? Is because people will start to target you more for that reason. I kind of started to explain what spiritual warfare is there a little bit, but I didn't explain kind of the way you'll feel it, more so the way you'll experience it. And I want to describe this because I did a series of videos this morning on TikTok about spiritual warfare, but it's a short form, and I wanted to expand on these ideas a little bit more, give myself more time to chew on them, right, and see what comes out. So as I've done this, right, I've been experiencing all of this negativity, coming from people as I say what I believe is true. And it isn't all that, a lot of positivity too. But then there's a certain type of seepage that you'll feel, degradation and physical change that is very slow and gradual, but happens, that you'll start to feel when people start to launch spiritual attacks at you, right? What it feels like to be spiritually attacked, it feels different depending on what part of the process, where you're at in the process. Initially, it can feel simply like lethargy, right? Just being kind of tired, or being unable to sleep, or having kind of some unpleasant thoughts that you've never had before pop in your head, or thinking too much about a certain person that isn't significant to you, or developing a lot of anger out of nowhere towards people maybe that you love. It'll start to try to isolate you, right? A spiritual attack tries to make you feel insecure fundamentally, right? Because your power comes from knowing what you are. There's this idea in the spiritual world and spiritual community, because it's been commodified so much in the modern day because of our economy as well, that you need to protect yourself. What you need is a stone or a rock or a healing session or Reiki or whatever it is, right? And while that could be a part of your healing, it is never, and I promise you, ever going to heal you in the way that you think it should. It will provide a certain respite from the pain you're feeling in the moment, but if you don't do the individual work, the very tough work that is demanded of you internally and spiritually, it won't go anywhere. It won't change, and you'll find yourself attached to those people, the healers, as a certain type of routine, right? You'll have to go back to them over and over and over again. And this is why I speak of it, because the spiritual community, there's a lot of people that know that. On the other side of that, there's a lot of spiritual healers that use that as a means of making a living. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing fundamentally. That's something that I intend to do at some point as well. But you have to be very, very, very intentional when you're doing that about when and how you go about making that into a business, because of the way people have been taught to make businesses modern day. Try to intertwine the ideas or the principles of the economic world with the principles of the spiritual world, and I promise you they're opposites. Right? One will tell you that worldly possessions, all of these things, external factors are things you shouldn't pay attention to. The other one will say you need to pay attention to all these external factors, take them into account, and then make a business based on what will most effectively serve everything outside of you. Right? So, as we start to go into the spiritual world, oftentimes what happens is people are delivered this message of, you have a gift. You're special. You're psychic. You can channel, whatever it is. And because in that moment in time we're usually insecure, we're looking for something to make us feel better, we'll latch onto that and say, I'm a psychic. I'm a channeler. And that is true. Everybody has this ability. That's the trick of it. You are gifted. It's just a universal gift. Everybody got it. It's only a matter of recognizing it's there. That's the only difference. There's a fundamental lie in telling people and leaving it at, you have a gift, because people misunderstand that and think that that's individual, specific to them. That's a human gift. The human beings are gifted psychically. They have this ability. It's similar to the way they see and the way they hear and the way they speak and the way they taste. It's a sense, right? So the reason it appears and sounds like initially it's a gift is because we're so insecure and disconnected from that truth that we think that we need to we need to become every part of that. We need to embody every part of that spirit, and we'll try to do that before we're ready for that. Right? I mean, it's a very hard concept I'm trying to get through here. It's complicated, right? But we'll try to become the spiritual healer externally before we've gone down the road of becoming the spiritual healer or the yogi or the sage or whatever you want to call it, or the witch or whatever you want to call it, right? And so if you automatically take that on, you'll find there's a whole bunch of people in this world that are ready to tell you and explain to you exactly how you can go and make money doing this. Right? Matter of fact, they won't overtly say it. You just go watch a YouTube channel or any of these other places about how you can read tarot cards or anything, because these are universal tools as well. Anybody can do this, right? And if you start using those tools with the intention of making a business and making money, I promise you, from that perspective, right? I have psychic gifts. Your next step is, let me make money off of it. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes, because that gift is not something that's meant to be, what's the right word? I'm not censoring myself. Hoard out, right? You don't sell yourself that way, which is another topic that we'll be talking about today. The idea of the way that we started to sell ourselves on these social media platforms based on what the next trend is. But I don't want to get off topic right now. So I'm speaking to, and many of you listening right now may have done this before, like I have, or it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a very common tripping point because we're impatient as modern human beings, and we're in a very specific way coddled, right, spiritually, to where we're never forced to do that kind of work growing up. When we're faced with it, we try to take a shortcut automatically. And it's dangerous because the communities that are forming based on the spiritual development, awakening, as it becomes more popular in the world, that tripping point is going to become more common, which means there will be more people out there using spirituality to get something from you, right? And that's very tricky. This is why I want to talk about it, because I see it everywhere already, but it's not as obvious right now because it's still the kind of new, fresh, popular thing, right? But it's not going to stay that way forever. And this is like channeled message coming through right now. This is from kind of our guides and ancestors and spirit, right? And I know this because I've lived this, right? When you do that, when you start to play with tools and things you don't understand, when you start to make deals or communicate with gods, you recognize the real and you're like, oh, let me start to manipulate them the way I manipulate human beings. This is what we'll start to do. You know, you'll talk to a god in your head the same way you talk to kind of somebody that you're trying to get something from or sell a couch to, right? And you can imagine a universal energy having this small finite thing come up to it, acting like it's God, trying to get something from it. You can imagine the reaction you'll get from the universe and from those things. It's not good, right? Essentially what happens is there becomes a period of time where they usually allow you to do your thing for a while. Go have fun, play with the toys, see what happens, right? There's a delayed effect to it, right? Because if everything happened immediately, there would be no lesson to it. You wouldn't be able to learn a lesson, a deeper lesson. You just react based on how you were affected in the moment. And that's not how we learn. There's a longer form learning that's built into this, right? Where you need to understand that you have free will, right? And that you also, with that free will, have the ability to overestimate your ability to control the world so much so that you'll try to literally change it and control it by making deals with things outside of yourself, right? And this tricky part, this is where the idea of the devil comes in, right? This is where the conception of the devil lives, the trickster, the joker, right? Is all of these things, when you start acting that way, that's how they treat you. They start playing with you. They'll act like whatever you want them to be. Because you're acting like you can manipulate something universal. So what you'll get back is something like, I'm your friend. Sure, I'll make you that deal. Oh, let's make that happen. You're right. They're shitty people. Just ignore that. Go do what you want. But you'll get the easy route. It's that devil on your shoulder saying, yeah. Ignore that guy on the right that says it's going to be hard, but you can make it. Why don't you just say, fuck that path? Why don't you take it? Right? It's in everybody. So this is happening, and this is happening at a grand scale in the spiritual community right now, right? There's a huge lesson being taught in that same community, this delayed effect, where many of the people that I've been seeing, feeling, and felt attacks from, I can see and hear and recognize these lessons starting to filter into people's lives karmically, right? Because that's that delayed effect I'm talking about. Once you go out into the world, you treat it like a playground, you treat it like it's something that you can just mess around with, other people included, like they're your playthings, right? Like their lives have less meaning than you, like they're less important than you. You'll go out and do a bunch of crazy, horrible shit, and you won't even recognize you're doing that horrible thing in the moment when you do it. And then, slowly, you'll recognize your life starts to get worse. It doesn't happen right away. Matter of fact, oftentimes you get rewarded in the moment. Specifically with this feeling, when we're unbalanced and we're trying to manipulate the world that way, we'll get rewarded in the moment. When you're successful, when you trick somebody, when you launch something at somebody and you see it hit them or affect them, you think, I won. Feel me, right? That never stays with them, right? You've made a fundamental error in judgment, raising yourself as if you're something that isn't playing by the same rules, karmically, right? Eye for an eye. We don't recognize this reality, we'll go and start acting as if we can be magic beings, we can be Merlins, and just cast whatever we want out into the world. And the world will let you believe that until all of a sudden it doesn't. And that is one of the deepest pits you can be thrown into. Because that karmic cycle that you develop in that process of mistaking how powerful you are and what you actually are magically can grow to a size where it can consume your entire life very, very quickly, right? Imagine we have all of these people running around stuck in their egos because we've all been manipulated our entire lives. And then we try to look for the truth, and you find it, but we're so habitually linked to this egotistical side of us that we treat that truth as a certain thing that should be manipulated and used. And then because we manipulate the very thing that is true, we accrue more pain and suffering and karmic lessons than we ever would have had to begin with, which is why I'm trying to bring this message. And it's very hard to get out because it's so complicated in some ways. Please, I beg of you, if you are somebody that's resonated with any part of what I've been talking about over these last 20 or 30 minutes, right? If you've experienced any aspect of this, the time to stop that kind of launching of energy out is always now, right? It won't immediately get better, right? But you're starting down the path of truth again, right? And everything that you have launched out, everything that you have sent to other people, you recognize that you will experience that again, right? Not as a punishment, so that you can understand why you don't want to act that way anymore, truly. And you'll believe that after you've experienced what you sent out. That's the only way it happens. You'll truly feel, I don't ever want to do this to somebody again, when you feel what it feels like to be spiritually attacked, you know? And what does it feel like? What does it look like when people are doing that to other people? What does it look like on your end if you're the person launching a spiritual attack at somebody, right? More often than not, this is another scary aspect of it, more often than not, there's nothing you're doing differently than what you're doing right now, except the conversation, the type of conversation that's going on internally. You could be sitting doing absolutely nothing. There's no ritual that's required. You don't have to light a candle. This is another live, the spiritual community. All of these things are tools. They're symbols. They are not the fundamental truth. They're meant to inspire the fundamental truth that you are the truth, right? You don't need these things. You can use them to remind you of these different fundamental vibrations, right? You pick up a selenite, it reminds you of that vibration. And so you get into that vibration and it lends you that specific type of protection, but you can do the exact same thing by thinking that vibration, by recognizing that vibration is a part of you already. You don't have to hold it. It's in you, right? And more specifically, the vibration is the attribute it's most closely represented by is authenticity. Right? Not just that specific stone, but all of the protective measures that you use in your spiritual world and spiritual life, all of those can be replaced with authenticity. I mean this. Your authentic, true authentic self is not something that can be touched in that way. The only way it is touched is if you start to believe that you're something lesser than, if you start to degrade yourself again internally, if you start to feel insecure, then you welcome in that low vibration. That's how it lowers your vibration, right? That's why the point of awakening is to raise your vibration. You no longer have to be on that same realm of existence, that same plane, once you've gotten to that point. But getting out of that muck is a sludge. It's a slog, right? And it takes a long time of intense work. But the point is to get to that higher vibration, because once you're there, you are it. You're protected. There's nothing else you need, right? And isn't that so beautiful? So that, you know, if you are experiencing these spiritual attacks, right? If you're the person that feels that has been a victim of this, of groups of people attacking you this way or whatever, recognize that that's part of your journey. You have to embrace it. You cannot put on your armor and act like you're going to go fight the same battle with them. That's the lowering of your vibration back to that warfare mindset. You're transmuting the warfare mindset. You're saying, okay, war continues because of the response. Because harm happens, people act in harmful ways. So if I want to raise myself out of that, and as a corollary, the entire world, the way that I do that is by not responding to what is being sent my way, by recognizing that if it's here, I can deal with it. If I'm experiencing pain, if I'm experiencing suffering, the only thing I need to do is be more honest about who I am, and I will protect myself. And then you'll see how that is actually the path. People that launch attacks towards you as you're speaking truth are helping you. I truly mean this, because they're giving you the fuel that you need to get past that hurdle towards the more authentic version of yourself if you have the courage to do so. And I mean that. It is a courageous task, and a long one at that. It's Sisyphus embodied, right? So, as a victim, know that you are protected as long as you're on that path. And I mean that to truth. It doesn't mean you won't feel the ramifications as you are on that slog, as you are pushing that rock up the hill, right? You're going to feel every aspect of it. That's the point. That's why you'll never be that again. That's why you'll never treat anybody that way. You know what it feels like, right? And in addition to that, you know how to transmute it too. You're more than enough to deal with it now, right? The power that comes from taking something so unbalanced and balancing it is divine. It requires nothing else besides you and your choice. That's it. You choose. I want to release this. You say, I want to transmute this instead of responding, and that's what happens. You find a way to do that. You let go of it. And you become more powerful and more authentic in the process. The people launching these attacks, the way they're doing that more often than not is by thinking negative thoughts to you, simply put. That is magic, guys, and I mean this, and I've said this many times at this point, but from what I understand and what I've discovered, magic operates fundamentally through that. One of the ways you interface with that realm is through your thoughts, right? And specifically the way you direct your mind, right? You have a certain amount of autonomy internally, and it's basically, what do you want to focus on? Right? You can notice this through deep meditation. It's basically a process of recognizing where you want to place your focus, right? When you do that, once you recognize that's one of the things you're in control of, you can choose how to view every single situation, right? And recognize that that actually has a fundamental effect on the way the thing is constituted, right? This is something that I do believe is backed up in quantum theory, but just hasn't necessarily been said in that way. But this idea of kind of, well, I think Einstein talked about like spooky action at a distance, but quantum entanglement, and there's this idea that the the spin of a particle is based on the viewer, right? Or the way the particle behaves as either a particle or a wave depends on if somebody is viewing the particle, right? Something like that. And so which is fascinating, right? Because this kind of backs up or really matches up nicely with the spiritual truth that everything is fundamentally vibration, right? So when you're not viewing the part, I believe this is how it works. When you're not viewing it, it operates like a wave. But as soon as you place a perspective, your perspective on it, it immediately becomes something that we view that way, as a dot, as a point in where it has a spin, however you want to describe it. Again, I'm not a quantum theorist, but I can see the similarities in the idea, in the concept, right? And I believe this is the functional way through which you construct your own reality. I truly believe this. This is why your thoughts are magic. Because it's not only, I don't believe it's just you looking at something. It's the way you look at something, right? So if we were to, and I'm sure we will at some point, but if we were able to expand that experiment, if you view a particle or not, and whether it shows itself as a wave or a particle, I'd be interested to see, through further experiment, whether there was any way to change the wave form when it is in a waveform based on your intent towards it, right? Or if, like, when you're viewing, the particle, if the way you view the particle affects the waveform when you stop viewing it, right? Does it change? Because 4224, I really believe there's something there. I think it might. And I think this is how we construct and we create the world through our thoughts, very, 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 very subtly, but fundamentally, right? Your thoughts construct reality fundamentally. And this is why heaven and hell are real here, right? You know this if you've ever been in hell. You'll shake your head yes, right? Because it's a place you can experience here. If you don't believe me, go ask anybody that's been in a war or that's been abused in any way or has been an addict, or you just go around, you'll find them. Hell exists, and it exists right here. The same is true for heaven, right? This is why the Buddha exists, right? Nirvana is heaven on earth, right? You can attain that state. Everybody can. Right? This is also the point of Jesus. So both of those places are possible in the same space. And it is, and all of those teachers, regardless of what tradition you go through, will tell you something like, it depends on how you view it, right? So that if you view something negatively, it is negative. It's the only way it can be constituted. If you view something positively, it is positive. It is the only way it can be constituted because your sight is what defines it, right? So, and you know this because if there was nobody to see it, how could you say it's there, right? This old thought experiment, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, it's a hard one, chicken or egg kind of argument, but I'd like to believe you can view it in multiple ways. If you want to believe that all of this would be going on without us here, without animals here, without things here, I guess you could maybe kind of argue for it in an evolutionary standpoint, the evolution of the solar system at a certain point, right? But I believe that these are, and this is just my belief, that evolution is something that's happened over obviously a very long time, and that consciousness has developed in tandem with the physical form, the bodies in which it's evolved. So in a certain way, the earth, each celestial body has a certain type of consciousness. This has been recognized by every, tribe throughout the world, this idea of Gaia, or Mother Earth, right? This is why we refer to it as a her, because it has a certain type of consciousness, a very primordial consciousness, but something nonetheless that does have a consciousness that we failed to recognize. Now, that existed in the evolution of the solar system, I believe. And everything that developed out of that evolution, that creation of the solar system, including the biological organisms that grew out of it, came out of it, grew out of Earth, that consciousness, right? So that if we're keeping with the idea that aliens didn't interject stuff, but we'll just keep it simple for now, right? So that you have everything that's ever developed evolutionarily is linked to the same fundamental thing, Earth. Right? And this is a consciousness, and that consciousness has been trying to enunciate itself more fully for millennia. And the way it's done it is through developing a more complex vessel through which it can channel itself and its energy. If that vessel is willing to recognize it isn't the point, if the vessel recognizes, hey, I'm not God, then automatically you become something that speaks this kind of fundamental consciousness, truth. Marcus Aurelius also speaks of this when he talks about the nature of the whole. He is talking about a conscious thing when he speaks of a nature of the whole. This complex process that is constantly going on, that is fundamental and doesn't care about your opinion of it. It just does what it does. That is a consciousness, a certain type of consciousness, even if it is very primordial, that we fail to recognize. But many, and I believe most, of the most radical thinkers throughout history have, at some point, recognized that fact. You have to, right? You have to understand this truth. So, in that, we are all connected. Our thoughts create the reality in the world that we see. And the universe is trying to construct a more true version of itself every moment through you and me and our complexity. But that is complex, right? So that you have that choice on whether you want to be that thing or not. And when you choose not to be that thing, you become something that starts to automatically degrade it and destroy it. And while you're doing that, you will convince yourself that you're its savior, most often than not. Because nobody, and I mean nobody that I've found, ever justifies, except for jokers, which they're very, very rare, right? Ever justifies what they're doing based on the idea that I'm a villain and I want to be the best version of my villain. More often than not, we base it on a perverted justice idea that we were hurt so badly, we have been attacked so badly, we have had all of these things done to us so much that the world itself is unjustified. So that any action we take against it is a certain type of justice that we deserve and that the world deserves to feel. right? That's how you justify doing absolutely horrendous things to human beings, other animals, and the planet itself, I believe. That's black magic, too. And one of the deepest forms of it. That's you embodying the devil energy, saying, I am your vessel, and I'm going to help you tear this down, right? That's what that kind of thinking leads to. When we start to think negative, and this is why it's so important to enunciate spiritual warfare, what it is, how it operates, and how you will fall victim and prey to it, because it can destroy your life, right? And I mean that. If you start to treat the world in that way, if you accept that energy into you and say, hey, yeah, let's go get me justice, you won't like what you become when you look in the mirror 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. So, a lot of energy, 50 minutes in, a lot of energy coming through on that topic, guys. But I felt very compelled over the last today to talk about that, because I've been coming to a culmination. I was very viciously attacked on TikTok and other platforms by not just one person, but groups of people for a very long period of time, in ways that, like I said, are stuff I don't even want to say out loud, right? Things that will really, truly, if you let it warp your mind and make you hate the world, that kind of hatred exists, right? This is why I say it out loud. Please be careful and recognize you're strong enough to stand against those things, if that and when that does happen to you, right? Because it will try to challenge everything you say you believe, and it will specifically try to get you with that victimhood. Look at all this shit that's still happening to you. You've done nothing but say the truth, and what do you get? Nothing. You get worse than nothing. You get torn down. You get attacked. You get belittled. You get disgraced. That's where you're choosing. What do you want to be? Right? That's spiritual warfare. What side of that do you want to be on? Is the question. Which kind of brings me, or in a tangent here, to my next topic, which is this AI trend that I'm seeing all over TikTok specifically. For those of you that aren't on TikTok, I'd recommend you get on it, even if you're not a big fan of the platform. The reason I say that is not to kind of advertise for TikTok. I'm definitely not a huge fan of the platform after the last week and a half, because they're very heavily into censorship at this point. But what I do notice is it is the zeitgeist water cooler at the moment, right? It is where people are going to share ideas and to get information on the world in a very, very kind of unfiltered way, as much as we can have modern day. Which I don't necessarily think that's always going to be the case. I think TikTok is getting kind of locked down very quickly right now as we speak, and it's going to be necessary to find other platforms very soon. That there's this, there are these trends, there's these lessons that are being kind of broadcast out through these social media platforms, through the trends that are coming down week by week. The first one that or not the first one, but one of the first huge ones that I've noticed is kind of, what was it? There's a ton of them. It's a certain type of parroting of ideas, right? You can notice it right now in kind of the alien discourse. So I'm sure the first time you saw a video saying that the reason we don't care about aliens is because we're broke and can't pay our rent, I'm sure it hit hard and it was like really funny and things like that, just like it was for me. And then like the other 1,500 times that you saw it after that, of people making the exact same video, right? Trying to say the exact same thing because they liked the idea, but obviously unable to enunciate their own. These are trends that I believe is important that you see, right? The way that people will act. This is why I'm on TikTok. It's very interesting to watch the way that people will act in relation to these kinds of stimuli, specifically this AI trend that's becoming very popular right now. It's another post that I made not too long ago, but I find it disturbing because it specifically kind of illustrates the level of indecency we're willing to display towards ourselves. in terms of honoring who we are, our individuality, our autonomy and freedom as individuals, and its importance, our willingness to give it away for something as simple as a tip on a nap, right? For those of you that don't know, the AI trend that's going through TikTok right now is basically a trend where people on live, content producers on live, create a certain type of character, right? A character that mirrors or acts like the characters you'd find in video games, specifically NPC characters. So if you saw Free Guy, that movie not too long ago, that's a good example of what an NPC character would be, right? Somebody that kind of goes on a repeat, doesn't have any depth to it, but is there to represent something in the world, not necessarily actually be it, right? So looks like a cook, talks like a cook, but can't actually cook, right? That's the idea. We just need to have the facade there. This is a trend that people have started to embrace, where they make their own character, NPC character, whatever kind of is specifically relevant to them, and then make money on TikTok acting these characters out. And on the surface, when I describe it like that, it doesn't sound that bad, right? People can do what they want. I'm not saying you shouldn't do whatever you want, but when you analyze it deeper, it starts to become a little disturbing. And not only a little, it's a lot disturbing, because when you watch these videos, there is something that comes through. It's a very deep sadness that I feel as I watch these videos. And initially it was kind of off-putting. There's something about the videos that makes you want to continue to watch them as they go through these repetitive, to give you an example of what they'll do, they'll kind of act out like a robot, like the same saying over and over again, depending on what people tip them. So people can give roses or cowboy hats or slices of pie or whatever. There's all these different symbols, and they develop these canned phrases based on the symbol that's given to them. So it's like, I love roses, and as people give them, they have to say that, right? So people are sitting there just paying them money, sending all these different tips based on these different images, and they're creating these different canned phrases and just repetitively doing them for hours and hours and hours. And there is something like that makes you want to watch it. It makes you want to continue to watch it. It's this loop cycle kind of thing, but there's also this deep sadness that comes through as you watch it. Sadness for the individual there that is not being displayed, right? Now, while I recognize every single person that's doing that is not trading their autonomy away permanently, that is not something you want to play with, right? Not even in that kind of way, right? Where hey, I'm going to pretend like I can't make my own decisions for 6 or 7 hours, or I'm going to give away my freedom to other people because they're paying me for this long. It's actually the point that I'm getting to there. But the fact that we'll give our freedom away is a representation of how little we value freedom in today's society. It's shameless lack of respect for the idea of freedom, this right that you have been granted based on the sacrifices of people that have come before you, and the necessity that it now entails on anybody who's willing to actually see that truth to reinvigorate that spirit of freedom and liberty inside of the individuals that still believe in it. And while you may tell yourself, I'm just doing this for money, that's the excuse most people use to do anything. And we'll always tell ourselves in the moment, I'm not going to feel bad about this because I need money, or I need to pay my rent, or whatever it is. The universe is trying to teach you a lesson that you don't need to do that. You're not the thing that provides that. That's one of the egotisms that's trying to be broken down in the awakening process. You will lose everything if you're truly going through the awakening at some point. And it's not to punish you, it's to demonstrate this truth to you. You don't provide for yourself. That's a lie. That's a very egotistical lie. As if you're something that actually kind of is powerful enough to do that, to organize the world, direct it, and all of these kind of things in relation to something divine, right? To a greater plan, to a greater balance, if nothing else, if you want to talk about it more evolutionarily. And so there's this idea that Jesus speaks of, usually quote it, paraphrase it quite a bit. I'll find it so I don't keep doing that. Jesus. Hang in there for me. Here we go. It's Matthew 6:30. This is one of my favorite ones. There's a bunch of different versions, but here's the one that I'll read. This is BibleHub.com, and I'll post this in the show notes so you can find it too. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you of little faith? I'll read another version of it. And if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? Right? This is the lesson that's very deeply attached, and taught in the awakening process when you're losing things. It's this way in which, as soon as we start to be we're made uncomfortable, we'll start to act as if we need to control everything again. We need to control the universe and make sure it knows that we're suffering. And when in reality, that's an assumption that is trying to die, that the universe and God is trying to show you isn't true. And it's a certain pressure you place on yourself your whole life, and you have that you have to worry about where it's going to come from next. If you believe that you don't have to worry where it comes from next, you don't have to worry where it comes from next. That is true. It's so fundamentally true, it's mirrored in nature, which is why Jesus speaks of it that way. That's the truth that Marcus was seeing in the consciousness of nature, right? These are fundamental truths, and you can't deny them. You'll see them everywhere once you start to recognize them. So have faith, right? Don't use those excuses if you start to get uncomfortable. If you are having financial problems, don't sell yourself. Don't sell the thing that makes you proud of who you are. Your autonomy, your individuality, your beauty. Don't degrade those things. Right? There's many different ways we can do that in this world, not just by acting like a robot for 7 hours a day over and over again. You can do this through, selling images of yourself. You can do this through kind of acting like somebody else, or pretending to be somebody else, or competing with somebody else. The deeper point that brought me to contemplating why people are doing this is like I started to speak of, this deeper recognition that we've lost our respect for the idea of liberty and freedom. And the way that's happened is kind of modeled in our economy. Because the way I understand it, most people conceive of, you making money based on what you produce. Right? This is actually what underlies the theory of communism itself, right? Is that, the worker provides the labor and thus produces the product, but gets none of the means, right? Or none of the profit, or a minimal amount of the profit. Sorry, I lost my thought a little bit there. What's actually sold, and I mean this, is something different. You're not selling, when a company hires you, it's not buying your productivity. It's buying you. Your freedom. That's what I mean by it. And you can recognize this is true if you're brave enough. It's not a fun one, because it's a recognition that you've been in slavery your whole life and you haven't recognized it. And I mean that. I don't know who ever convinced anybody that because I give you something that doesn't exist, a dollar bill, something that I say has value, I give you this, now it's okay to treat you however I want to treat you, to steal all of your time, all of your attention, all of your ability to cope with whatever happens in this workplace, because you'll have nobody to go home to because of that time that we've stole, right? All of the most fruitful years of your life, that's what I'm buying. That's why I'm paying you money. And that isn't set. Which is why people on AI selling their autonomy, literally, is actually an enunciation of a deeper truth that's been around for a very long time, and one that's very hard to see and very sad. Which is why you'll feel sad if you watch those, I promise you. You have to search deep down. It's there. This is sad. Just because you work for somebody else does not mean you're a slave. I want to clarify this, right? But you have to understand the context through which our economy operates, and thus most business leaders and structures operate in relation to people that fill them out, is this way. They treat them like things that are being purchased. And I ask you, when you purchase human beings, what are you a part of? Just because you give those human beings you purchased enough money to not die, and that's literally what we're at now, enough money to not die mostly, it's not slavery. Matter of fact, even if you give them a lot of money, right, you could say it's their choice to leave, but even if you give them a lot of money, I would argue that it's just a very, very, very malicious, hidden form of slavery, compulsion. Because they also know that the more money you gain, the more compulsive it is to retain it. So that as I give you more money, I'm buying more of you, your truth, your identity, what you'll say, what you're willing to say against me, right? Which is why you see politicians degrade. Which is why you see people, as they go up the hierarchy of organization and start to make more money, why they no longer say the same things or speak the same truths or even criticize the structure. Matter of fact, they start to protect it. Why do they do that? That's why. They're prisoners. They just don't want you to see that. So they run around saying that I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich. Look at all the things I have. I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. Don't buy it. Please, don't buy it. Because, like I said, there's fundamental truths that are recognizable in nature. Ones like what Jesus was speaking about. That if a blade of grass doesn't give a shit whether it rains or whether it's a wildfire tomorrow, why would it matter? Whether if you took that out and blew it up, would a blade of grass give a shit if it had a car or a house or a boat or a 50-inch plasma screen? It's old technology at this point, but you get the point, right? No. Matter of fact, the more I focused on those things as if it was something that actually sustained it, the less it would recognize that there's something underlying that's providing what it really needs, consistently, reliably, and as much as it needs it. Until it's time for it to not be a thing anymore. So, this has been a powerful episode, guys. It's a little bit of a shorter one, actually, but I'm going to be on more often on the podcast, and like I said, with more contemporary issues, so it'll be more relevant to what you're going through right now. And so it's going to be a little shorter form. It won't be 3-hour-long episodes or hour-and-a-half-long episodes every time. But I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for your support. And like I said before at the beginning, please, if you do have any means of donating to the show, you can do that through the show page. There's a donation section on there. You can do that through my Linktree. It's Linktree/Chris the Sage. You can do it through the tip jar on there, or if you just want to support the podcast, you can't afford doing anything like that. Whatever social media platform you use, share it, follow it on whatever podcast platform you use, and we'll start to grow this thing, or we'll continue growing this thing. So I want to thank you all for your listenership, for your support, for continually being here as I walk this path, and I just want to relay to you how thankful I am to have other people that are engaging with this. It's an honor to have people listen to this, and I mean that. Thank you. Lots of love. See you soon.